And now, a preview from the upcoming novel by Kevin Snow. Fear and Loathing on the 2020 Campaign Trail. An introduction by the author. A few notes on ideology, Kirby's The Death of Postmodernism, and the line between reality and fiction. If you just came here for the action, skip ahead. These notes aren't for you. But I would like to write down a few words for those more avid readers and for those who are curious and would like a deeper insight into what my ideology may look like, so I am not misleading anyone about the fictional representation of my character here and the real author. You can start calling me Marxist now, really. Go ahead. I like it. I have judged from the questions about Schultz, you don't have to have read Schultz to read this novel, that there is much confusion about what I mean when I describe postmodernism and its failure. For those who still struggle to mentally conceptualize what postmodernism is, let me provide a more visceral explanation. What? You must first imagine a world without science, the American constitutional democracy, without a working class that suddenly had a disposable income. This is the world before modernism. Once the aforementioned events became reality, slave labor continued to flourish into the modernist times, either as a direct result of colonialism and capitalism or because of decolonialism's failures to eliminate Jim Crow law, apartheid, etc., etc. However, many of the narratives of oppressed people began to become part of the common narrative written in history, recorded in books of law, books of science, theater plays, etc., etc. Welcome to postmodernism. Meanwhile, modernism struck back to defend its territory. War ensued. This is the violent, stagnant state of modernism. Society could not abide under its new common core beliefs, and the social evidence of this is in events both good and bad. Good, the Summer of Love, the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act. Bad, the militarization of the state and federal U.S. police, the failure of the drug war, the AIDS epidemic. Many great thinkers such as Derrida, Foucault, Chomsky, and Zizek piled around these issues. But cracks began to show. Feminism scattered into several fighting factions. So did the theater and film industries. So did the media after the birth of the new journalism, gonzo journalism, etc., etc. The death of postmodernism and the birth of postmodernism is in a very real sense the age when all of these great postmodern thinkers and artists and scientists have passed on to other things post-mortem. The many questions yet to be resolved by their debates will be left at the feet of the generations after, the generations who history will write about as the postmodernists. Depending on how you look at it right now, it could be very bleak or much bleaker. Some of these questions by those who think there will be no postmodernism because postmodernism accomplished nothing will still be challenging are very basic questions like, what is truth? What is religion? Should women be able to wear makeup into work or not? The much bleaker reality that I see is that we will have a generation of people, the millennials, who can't answer them instinctively. They will just grow to accept this bullshit as the new normal and reject postmodern thought altogether. But I am not a postmodernist, either, because no matter what I think, the reality is that I will be swarmed with not self-aware postmodern millennials when I am a feeble curmudgeon writer who has nothing better to do than to think about the times we didn't have these dipshits around, so much so that I will not have a choice but to be overcome by their continued devotion to postmodernism. Their nostalgia for the art of the times, reboot after remake after reboot, and how their technology has ruined my own industry of writing to the point where none of the traditional ceremonial or financial events of being a writer, like getting a publishing contract, getting reviewed, getting an advance etc., etc., mean shit anymore. We are seeing the good of postmodernism erode away quickly, the plane is diving, and none of the great postmodernists left us with a clear plan of how to jump to safety. I happen to be the youngest of a few born into true pre-perestroika postmodernity, to be too young to ever have smoked on a plane but not too young to have been seated next to someone who was doing it. I am one of the last few people alive who will be able to say they know how to use DOS, can remember the fall of the Berlin Wall, and still knows how to adapt to use new technologies. I am told this is called a zennial. And most of us are the ones who are going to have to put up with these problems for the longest. We need to find the answers before they do, or we're all going to fucking prison. We have new problems that are really the old problems in this country, the United Snakes of America, and we are not yet ready to face that. The failures of modernism still have their last clutch in Trump, or so we thought. The reality could be even bleaker than that. Because certain influential postmodernists normalize the notion that every point of view is equal, even if not based in truth. The cold fact of reality is that there might never be a new normal that does not allow for the disgusting ideology, not just the behavior or moral ineptitude, of Trumpism to maintain a legitimacy even if it does not exist in fact. The Trumpists don't know it, but they are the culprits of postmodernism by a cultural war that is everyone else versus believing that spontaneous generation was never fully litigated correctly. More on that in a moment. The answer to all of this could be a centralized, normalized, functional form of ideology called postmodernism, if you will. One which achieves the equality of opportunity as envisioned by postmodernism, minus postmodernism's more authoritarian mistakes. But this reality can only exist if the people have the minds to form it. The constitutional right to food and water in Nepal gives me reason to be slightly optimistic. But that's Nepal. At home, here, we are fucking failing. We are too stupid, too distracted, too stuck under the weights of silence and poverty, and police and fear. I believe postmodernism, if it is to survive, must be communal and not classicist. If that makes me a Marxist or un-American, call me both to make it easier on yourself. I wouldn't want you to have to think too hard about this petty thing. I think it makes me someone who still believes in democracy. Either way, so far, we are fucking failing. There will be payback, I am sure, but the losers in this fight for America could never go away. We must find a solution and we must not look bad for the future generations while we do it. There is no going back. Impeach this fascist asshole Trump or it'll all be for naught. Don't rely on the Republicans to try and replace him at a time when their Facebook feeds are full of no collusion headlines and the most unfunny memes about the Clintons, and don't rely on the Democrats' ability to do so either at a time while their Facebook feeds are puppy pictures and Rachel Maddow reports. They're all old enough to be tired of this shit, too tired to really care about what the future will look like for your children. Rely on Putin to know what he's doing more than Robert Mueller. This is how I visualize the death of postmodernism, as Kirby explained. The most positive outcome could be a more authoritarian form of postmodernism with the burden of authoritarian rule hidden in bureaucracy and the ability of the US government to outtax the citizens indefinitely. This will not look like the successful Scandinavian democratic social models, like Norway, which is too liberal even for Bernie Sanders. And good luck convincing any more of my brothers and sisters from Scandinavia to move here to help build that future for you. I've sent them a memo. You're stuck with me until you can get this figured out, America. According to popular conceptions, a Sanders centralized US without a further, deeper left to counter the Sanders base would theoretically look more like the authoritarian capitalist society, with 70% votes going towards a single candidate. Why can't we look more just like Canada, or like Norway? Because you're not self-aware American buffoon. I do not have that much faith in the American people. Neither should you. In America, what that would actually look like is a deep left puppet propping up a supermajority for the Democratic Party. And this is not a free society either. These are the same voting statistics that Putin gets. I write for perspective. I think the US overwhelmingly wants their elections to look like the Super Bowl and not the NBA playoffs, in a sense, and this is a big fucking ideological problem for all of us, and it's not postmodernism's fault. Why think about elections as a television event at all? Or sports? Are we that out of ideas? We have not normalized enough of the good ideas from postmodernism to rethink this failure of both modernism and postmodernism, making a liberal authoritarian nightmare the only easy way to escape total social entropy without a centralized postmodern game plan. The word. ... I remember Professor Joe Rogan as the Barbie doll from early sets I visited around Hollywood who dove to the depths of reality television exploitation, sucking on the government's fear-mongering pro-authoritarian reactionary Christian conservative media scare tactics. The sucketh goes on YouTube, a self-flatulating parody of the social media warrior culture it aspires to criticize. Load up on fear to cure your boredom if you choose. Or get to know Sam Harris' list of ought-to-be celebrities. I have better things to do. Those of us who get enough brutality in our daily lives to know what to really fear don't really see the fear factor in our lives as a hobby. Praise Satan. Load on. Venom in. Anyway, unschooled tangent. What a resume, Rogan. And to his fans, if you expected as much from me in my gonzo journalism pursuits, as far as sticking to the old routine, you will be sorely disappointed. Did Tom Wolfe just argue against Darwinism? And wasn't Samantha Bee in that Woody Allen movie? We'll get back to my John Oliver story later, in the postscript. Not now. Let's move on. Time is short. Back to what I was saying earlier. I haven't even begun to speak on the most recent terrorist accusations against me from Trump's supporters, NRA lunatics and red state unlicensed lawyers who think I should be in Guantanamo for what I have written here, the many I have received in recent months. I won't have the time to go into this novel, either. Etc. I'll send you a PowerPoint. Moving on. Ah yes, spontaneous generation truthers and Joe Rogan. Ultraviolence and metafiction. I have imagined my novel on a deeper read to be a visualization of the current culture war through an old pre-modernist gimmick of actualized fictional violence. The scenes of violence are contextually complex, to reflect the complex debates in the postmodern cultural war we still see remanences of today in Trump, but I defend even the most senseless acts of violence in this novel by referencing their deeper meaning in the fight to decide what is real and what is not in America. Also, I don't understand why all violence in fiction isn't senseless. And thirdly, fuck the anti-postmodernists. But, I realize I have an audience to entertain in a few pages. I don't really want to get caught up talking about ideologies I think are for clowns. I won't devote another 12 pages justifying this choice, so moving on. Etc. etc. In other words, the death of a character in some places is a metaphor for the death of an ideology. Joe Rogan is murdered very early on in the novel. His death represents the death of the ideology of his show The Joe Rogan Experience and not his actual death. I did this early on because I think whatever Jr. and about 90% of what his regular guests say is utter nonsense and 10% fear-mongering. And yet, his presence in our debates on the elections has normalized people at Joe Rogan kindergarten like Alex Jones, etc. etc. I am not alone in my belief that Jr. should stick to talking about UFOs and Bigfoot. In this world, the metafictional presence of JRK is dead. So is Fox News. But you probably already knew that if you've been paying attention. To even suggest that we ought to be such postmodern revisionist apologists as to even entertain propaganda people like Jr. and Alex Jones is preposterous to me. I won't allow it. Save it for your posters. In the immortal words of Christopher Hitchens, fuck off. Don't look so happy, American progressives. This novel won't be so easy for you to swallow, either. There will be no imitation of your John Oliver and Samantha Bee style of humor herein. My satire is much darker and much to the left of this popular form of fast food entertainment. Equally, the sex in this novel is often a metaphor for the merging of ideologies, but sometimes it is not. Sometimes, they are just sex scenes from my life, or from my protected sources, fictionalized here because they were part of the fact of the events upon which this story is very loosely based. Sometimes a pipe is just a pipe, except when it is not. That should be enough puzzle pieces, for you avid readers, to put together a more informed opinion about your own thoughts as to what the fuck we should do about this 2020 campaign trail crisis. See you in the postscript.